It's 11 p.m. in Havana, and the trumpet down the street hasn't stopped for 3 hours. Salt air rolls in off the Malecon, mixing with diesel exhaust from a 1957 Chevrolet idling at the curb. Its paint the color of a mango at sunset. Somewhere behind a cracked balcony rail, a woman is hanging laundry under string lights, laughing at something we can't hear. A domino game clatters on a folding table 2 doors down. Someone's radio is tuned to an old bolero. Kids are chasing a half-flat football under a street lamp that flickers more than it shines. An old man is sharpening a machete for tomorrow's garden work. And none of it feels staged, because none of it is. Nobody rehearsed this for the cameras. This is simply Tuesday. This is a country where the buildings are falling apart and the people are somehow not. Both things are true at once, and neither one cancels out the other, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that contradiction isn't a flaw in the story. It is the story. 90 miles off the coast of Florida sits an island of roughly 11 million people, stretched more than 700 miles from tip to tip. Longer than England, narrower than a country this size has any right to be. Havana alone holds close to 2 million of them, packed into a capital where the average building is older than most nations, and where entire blocks of Spanish colonial architecture stand one hard rain away from collapse, yet somehow keep standing anyway, propped up by wooden beams, patched plaster, and a stubbornness that seems to run in the water. Drive 2 hours in almost any direction, and the city dissolves into sugarcane fields, tobacco farms, and fishing villages that haven't changed their rhythm in generations. This is Cuba. The question was never really whether Cuba's beautiful. Beaches like Varadero and Cayo Coco settle that in about 4 seconds of drone footage. Water so pale blue it looks color-corrected even when it isn't. The real question is what that beauty is standing next to. Decades of a U.S. trade embargo, chronic shortages of everything from cooking oil to antibiotics, a rationing system that still governs how families eat, and a one-party political system that shapes almost every visible layer of daily life, from the newspaper on the stand to the internet signal in your pocket. This is Cuba, and the question we're really asking today is not is it beautiful, but what did that beauty cost, and who is still paying for it? Now, the part almost no visitor expects. Cuba has kept a fleet of roughly 60,000 pre-1960s American cars running for over half a century. Not as museum pieces trotted out for tourists, but as daily taxis, family sedans, and wedding cars. Powered in many cases by Soviet-era diesel engines swapped in under the original hood. Mechanics here don't order replacement parts from a catalog. They cast them, weld them, or trade them, passing the knowledge from father to son like a second language, learned in backyard garages instead of trade schools. It isn't nostalgia dressed up for Instagram. It's necessity turned into an art form, born the moment a 1962 trade embargo cut off new car imports almost entirely and never let up. And it has quietly turned an entire generation of Cuban men and women into some of the most resourceful mechanics on the planet, working with tools that would be considered obsolete almost anywhere else. But look closer, because the cars are only the most photogenic symptom of something much bigger. The same improvisation that keeps a 56 Bel Air on the road, keeps refrigerators humming, apartment wiring alive, and bicycles rolling on tires patched more times than anyone could count, sometimes with nothing more than rubber cut from an old tire tube and a bit of glue. Cubans call it resolver, to resolve, to figure it out. And it isn't a hobby or a quirky national trait for tourists to admire from a distance. It's a daily requirement, practiced from childhood, because the alternative is simply doing without. Hold on to that thought. We will get there. First, the ordinary texture of a Cuban day. The food here runs on what's available more than what's craved. Rice and black beans cooked together as congri, roast pork saved for special occasions and Sundays, plantains fried twice into crisp discs called tostones, yuca boiled and drizzled with garlic oil, and coffee stretched with roasted chickpeas or peas when the real thing runs short at the state-run ration store. Meat, eggs, and cooking oil are still distributed in limited monthly quotas through a ration booklet called the Libreta, a system introduced in 1962 that, remarkably, is still in use today, even if what it provides now covers only a fraction of a family's actual monthly needs. The climate swings from thick, damp tropical heat for most of the year into hurricane season, with little warning between June and November. And Havana's streets fill with a strange, loud, oddly beautiful choreography. 1950s sedans, Soviet-era lettuce, bicycle taxis called bicitaxis, horse-drawn carriages in smaller towns, and packed articulated buses nicknamed camelos for their humped shape, all sharing the same crumbling, potholed asphalt with barely a working traffic light in sight. Stray dogs nap in the shade of colonial doorways, mostly fed by whichever neighbor has scraps that day, rather than any single owner, tolerated as a kind of unofficial community pet. Families here tend to live multi-generational under one roof, not by lifestyle trend, but by genuine housing shortage and old tradition both. And that closeness shows up loudly in how often relatives are folded into daily decisions, how children are raised by an entire building rather than one household, and how rarely anyone is left to handle a hard problem completely alone. Yes, this is the part the title promised. The beaches, the cars, the romance. Varadero's sand is famously fine and almost white, the water somewhere between turquoise and glass, and it's genuinely one of the most photographed coastlines anywhere in the Caribbean, drawing well over 1 million visitors a year to that stretch of coast alone, most of them arriving with exactly this image already fixed in their head from a travel brochure or a friend's photo album. The timeless romance isn't just marketing copy either. Cuban culture runs on salsa, sun, and rumba, on dancing in the street with total strangers, on a physical warmth and openness in daily interaction that visitors from more reserved cultures often find disarming within about an hour of landing. Whether it's a shopkeeper humming along to the radio or an entire block turning out for a birthday party held on the sidewalk because the apartment upstairs is simply too small to hold everyone who wants to come. But here's the pivot, because a fair look never stops at the postcard. That romance and that beauty exist right alongside a tourism economy that a huge share of Cubans quietly depend on precisely because state salaries are so low. A state-employed doctor here can earn less across an entire month than a hotel bellhop sometimes earns in tips over a single week. The postcard version of Cuban charm is, underneath, often also an economic survival strategy, dressed up in good rhythm and better weather than the paycheck deserves. Cuba's history is not a gentle one, and it explains a great deal of what we've been describing. Colonized by Spain for nearly 4 centuries, the island fought a brutal, costly war for independence in the 1890s, endured the sinking of the USS Maine and direct U.S. military intervention, only to fall under heavy American economic and political influence for much of the 20th century, including a period under the Platt Amendment that effectively limited Cuban sovereignty for decades. Then came the 1959 revolution, led by Fidel Castro, the nationalization of American-owned businesses and land, the missile crisis of October 1962 that pushed the entire world to the edge of nuclear war, and more than 60 unbroken years of a U.S. trade embargo, formalized in law in 1962 and tightened further over the decades, that has shaped nearly every material shortage Cubans still deal with today, from car parts to medicine to computer chips. Add regular hurricanes that batter the island almost every year, and the so-called special period of extreme scarcity through the 1990s, when Soviet economic support collapsed overnight and the economy contracted by more than a third in just a few years. Power outages lasting entire days, public transport reduced to almost nothing, and food shortages so severe that raising backyard pigs and chickens became common practice even in the middle of Havana. And you get a population that has learned, generation after generation, to turn scarcity into music and grief into a party that never once apologizes for existing. Resilience here isn't a marketing slogan. It's a survival skill, inherited, tested repeatedly, and never fully retired. Here's where the armchair daydream becomes a spreadsheet. A state doctor's official salary can run somewhere around $40 to $60 a month at informal exchange rates, while a single meal at a tourist-facing paladar might cost a visitor $15 to $20, nearly a third of that doctor's entire monthly income, spent on one dinner. It's not unusual, as a result, for trained doctors, engineers, and teachers to leave their professions altogether for jobs driving tourist taxis or working hotel front desks, simply because the tips paid in hard currency outstrip an entire month of state salary. Even after the 2021 currency unification, which folded the old dual peso system into a single official currency, Cuba still runs on a dual-track reality in practice. State rations distributed through a libreta booklet alongside a hard currency tourist economy that most locals can only access from the service side of the counter, not the customer side. The cheapness a traveler feels while exchanging money at a far more favorable informal rate is, for the person carrying the plate to their table, a distance measured in someone else's hours, someone else's degree, and someone else's rent. If you've made it this far and you're enjoying the journey, a like and a subscribe genuinely help. This is the secret the title promised, and it isn't hidden so much as quietly managed. The danger here isn't the kind that dominates headlines abroad. Cuba has notably low violent crime for tourists compared to much of the wider region, and walking Havana at night is, by most visitor accounts, safer than many major cities elsewhere. The real risks are quieter and more bureaucratic. Currency exchange scams targeting visitors unfamiliar with the peso system, black market cigar hustles sold as factory direct on street corners, taxi drivers who quote one fare and demand another, and a state security apparatus that monitors political dissent closely, with independent journalists, artists, and protesters facing genuine legal risk simply for speaking out publicly. Internet access, though meaningfully improved since mobile data first arrived in 2018, is still monitored by the state and has been restricted outright around moments of unrest, most visibly during the nationwide protests of July 2021, when access was cut for days in parts of the island. It's a country where the beach is safe and open to anyone, and the conversation about politics for locals very often isn't, carried out instead in lowered voices, behind closed doors, among people who trust each other completely. But here is a fact that says more about a whole country than any crime statistic could. Beyond the cities, Cuba holds astonishing biodiversity for an island of its size. More than 6,500 documented plant species, roughly half of them found nowhere else on Earth, along with crocodiles, iguanas, and coral reefs that have benefited, oddly enough, from decades of limited industrial development. Viñales Valley's limestone mogotes rise straight out of the tobacco fields like something out of a dream. Steep green-topped towers of rock that UNESCO placed under protection decades ago, and that remain largely untouched by the heavy resort development seen elsewhere in the region. The Zapata Swamp, the largest wetland in the entire Caribbean, hides the bee hummingbird within its mangroves. The smallest bird alive anywhere on the planet, light enough to be mistaken for an insect and small enough to rest on a fingertip. Offshore, the coral gardens around the Jardín de la Reina archipelago remain some of the healthiest in the Caribbean, protected in part by the very isolation that limits so much else here. This is a landscape that somehow escaped the paradise-flattening development that swallowed so much of the coastline elsewhere in the region, not entirely by choice, but the result is a country where nature got to keep more of itself than almost anywhere nearby. If this island is going to pull you in, here's where to put your feet first. Start in Havana's old town, Habana Vieja, for the architecture, the noise, and the general sensory overload. Restored plazas standing block by block next to buildings held together by not much more than pain and hope. Then head to Trinidad on the south coast, where cobblestone streets and pastel colonial houses sit frozen somewhere around the 1800s, largely untouched by modern construction and still lit by lantern in some corners at night. Viñales, out west, rewards anyone willing to slow the pace down among tobacco farms, limestone cliffs, and horse-drawn carts moving at a pace that makes a phone feel like an intrusion. Hidden gems worth the extra travel time include Baracoa, tucked on the far eastern tip of the island and considered one of the oldest European settlements in all of the Americas, and the diving around the Jardín de la Reina reef system, protected enough that sharks and untouched coral remain the norm there, rather than the exception. A few practical notes for anyone actually planning the trip. Bring cash, since most foreign bank cards still don't work on the island. Expect limited and sometimes expensive internet access, usually bought in blocks of time through prepaid cards sold at state kiosks. And book a casa particular, a private homestay licensed since the 1990s, for a far more honest window into daily life than any all-inclusive resort compound will ever give you, right down to the meals cooked in the family kitchen instead of a hotel buffet line. So here's the mirror. Cuba hands you a sunset over the Malecon, a 1956 Bel Air rattling past with the radio turned up, and a couple dancing on a street corner simply because the music demanded it and nobody saw a reason to refuse. And right underneath all of it sits scarcity, quiet surveillance, and a population that has had to build genuine joy out of very little for a very long time, without ever really being asked if that was a fair trade. The classic cars roll on not because Cuba chose vintage style over modern convenience, but because 6 decades of embargo never gave the island a choice in the matter. The beaches stayed pristine not purely by policy, but because the money to overbuild them never fully arrived. Even the music, as joyful as it sounds from a hotel balcony, carries the weight of everything the island has had to survive just to keep playing it. Maybe the real question here isn't whether Cuba is beautiful. It's whether you have ever once lived a single day the way they live, improvising, adapting, patching what's broken, and still finding a reason to dance anyway, night after night, decade after decade, with no guarantee that tomorrow gets any easier. If this journey moved you even a little, hit subscribe, because there's a lot more of the world left to see, honestly. One crumbling, colorful, defiantly alive street at a time.